We should have some fun. We should make some stupid,
overnight.
silly stuff. Because I can just white girl rap. So.
Guys,
So it's not anything good, but it still gets all the words out in the right speed.
Okay,
So
we are live. Any phone. Any phone. Go to the Breadcrumbs YouTube.
So here we are. I guess we're glad to have anybody.
There's only one person in there.
what's up, YouTube? This is my first live ever, so we'll just put
Nice.
that out there for now. Yep.
Not just our cherries.
Yeah, live streams are always fun, but it's really nice when you can see the comments.
Yeah, I like being able to see the comments. I
That's
agree.
how
We should have set something up here. So
I was gonna say, yeah, you could-
that's how
we should have
Chaz from
done that.
Breadcrumbs does it. He does his he does it live every day.
Yeah, we
and
can
he
put
has a
something
monitor
in.
here, monitor
You know
there.
what? Hey,
How do you spell your channel?
Breadcrumbs, BREAD.
The Breadcrumbs channel, or the Breadcrumbs project.
Breadcrumbs. Yeah.
Hey,
All right, guys. I appreciate it.
you guys are a little out of frame.
You want me to move in?
there we go. We can see it. We'll have to turn that down, obviously.
Thumbnail is perfect for this. I don't know how that happened.
Because he told us it was going to be the thumbnail photo, so we knew what to be ready for. Yeah.
Oh, you should just do.
Do it. Set it wherever you want, but make sure we can see the
You
thumbnail.
don't have. Oh, you don't have
Am I good, Penny?
the thing on it.
What do you mean the thing?
This.
Oh yeah. You do it.
I'll write them on the audio.
Sure are.
Look at that, Brian. You were on YouTube. I'm excited to do this with you guys. Like we had some pretty good conversations when we sat down and talked the other evening. You know, when we first got a chance to get to know each other, I enjoyed that.
Good stuff.
There you go.
Cool. I think we should good to get it started.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Luke Weingard and Mike Mullins are sitting here at FOB Geronimo for Steinbart Media Group. We've been privileged with being allowed to come in and talk to these folks, get an idea of what they're doing so that we can bring the information to you. And hopefully you'll see the relevance of Austin Steinbart and his involvement in the QAnon operation. So we're sitting here with Aaron Houghton and Alice Kennedy, who are both key members of the Steinbart Media Group. And they've allowed us the chance to come in and get to know them, ask them questions, challenge them, and just a couple regular guys looking to find the truth of what's going on with the world and the QAnon operation. And the invitation from Austin that was extended to pretty much anybody that wanted to come down here and have an interview with him has been, that mentality has been continued by the team here. So they've been very nice to extend an invitation to us to come here and have a little chat and bring you some information. So I'd like to say hello and welcome to their place.
Thanth you for having us. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it, guys.
Absolutely.
So
It's definitely a pleasure. It's been a pleasure meeting you guys. We got to know you for a few days out here, and yeah, I think we're all on the same team here. So
absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
it's very exciting to just meet people who are just willing to kind of give up their lives or whatever they have to do to support this community we're building around Austin, his case, you know, and not just him, but going forward, you know, really anybody who's dealing with this type of targeting by the FBI, CIA, government in general. It's not just Austin. We want everyone to feel this at home, like this could happen to them too. And that's all I've ever really tried to get across to people. Is not so much about Austin as it is, and his big, you know, ginormous claims about being Q,
Right.
getting messages from the future, all that stuff. If you set that aside and you look at how he's actually being targeted, it has nothing to do with his claims. And so that's our stance, you know, that's always been my stance from the beginning. It's just the level of hate and pushback he got, just about the things that were kind of abstract versus the hard facts that he was laying out there for people. So yeah.
This is for those of our truther friends who are not aware. This is Aaron Houghton and Alice Kennedy. They've both put a lot of effort into spreading the message, and we're just really grateful to both of you for sitting down and talking to us.
And just to mention, we are both the co-hosts of the Q Signal as well on YouTube. So again, pleasure to have another YouTuber pair on. You know, it really makes for a good
Collaboration.
good collaboration,
Absolutely.
good vibe for the whole thing. So yeah, really
It's
appreciate
all about
what you guys
unity
have been doing.
after
so.
all, and this is like just another
Of
big
course,
show
yeah,
of it.
and we're
you
always
know?
willing to meet.
Absolutely.
You know, when people are putting the work in. I mean, clearly you guys have been making videos. You've gone around to all of Austin's, you know, hot spots from his
essentially.
Stomping
videos,
grounds.
and
Yeah.
you've been putting all the, you know, and people love seeing that because that brings it to reality that they can actually see. Well, this is the things that he's saying, and these are the places we went to, and if it all turns out that what he's saying is true someday, that's going to be historic. So
And we have to bring attention to a wrongful arrest.
yeah,
There was no
Absolutely.
reason for a man who simply asked his friends and followers to request access to something he had contractual obligation. It was just a data warehousing place where he'd stored certain files, and out of the blue, the company understood the gravity of what was contained within those files, and they shut it off. He paid for access, and they blockaded him. He simply asked his followers to request that he be given his access back to what was rightfully his own. For this, he was charged with extortion. His home was raided by 15 FBI agents. His house was completely turned upside down. They took everything he had. They went through the attic insulation looking for anything they could find to frame him, to silence him, because he's the voice of the Great Awakening.
So I'd like to start, if you don't mind. I know that the ethos here is there's not necessarily ranks.
right.
It's a team, and I know you extend that philosophy really to everybody, not just members of the Steinbart Media
Absolutely.
Group, which is amazing. Could you maybe take a moment and each describe your roles, both with Steinbart Media Group and the QAnon operation in general?
Yeah, I mean, I would say just to start off like the broader kind of roles, like what you mentioned, where there's not really any leaders. We kind of run this like a meritocracy. Like think about how Trump runs his administration, how we would really want the United States to be run, especially think about illegal immigration. Bringing people in, you want it to be based off of meritocracy, meaning they have, you know, good intentions, they love the United States, they want to come here and work, they have some sort of skill. Same thing with how we run our organization. Everything kind of has to be a mirror. So if we're not running things just like what we want to see, which is things rewarded based off of work put in, you know, it all comes down to that. So for me, I'm basically just dealing with the people who run the Steinbart Media outside of here at Ford Operating Base. So we have a huge list of volunteers, and this is essentially how the company's been set up. Is it's a nonprofit where everybody at this point is just a volunteer, including myself. I make nothing from this. I've only put money in, and at this point, this is what we're doing is just building a grassroots sort of business movement, nonprofit, whatever you want to call it, with the goal of bringing awareness about not just Austin's situation, but the larger corruption in the world. Obviously, I mean, through Austin's story, everything that he's exposed, it's obviously much bigger than just him. So, yeah, my main job is just dealing with the interpersonal stuff, people here, people who are very close to the group in a sense, and just making sure projects are on track, whether it's our websites or things like that, and just generally communicating with people, making sure that they understand what they're doing, and that's so I know what they're doing, so I can communicate that to Austin and everybody else. So
Along with the Q City.
yeah, I'm just more of kind of like a middleman to Austin, to the people who have already been kind of close to Austin before he went in, people that he had already had contact with.
Yes.
So
These are all people that he essentially handpicked, you know, to
Yeah.
do a lot of these things. So we've continued to push through that, just, you know, despite his absence. Absolutely.
Yeah. So without looking for any sort of rank or title, how would you describe your role with the group and in the operation in general?
You know, it's super funny. I came into this sort of late compared to everybody else. My story is just like a little bit different of how I found everybody and how I met Austin. You know, it really all took off for me after my interview with Austin. I knew that was going to be a big deal, and that was partially why I avoided it for so long. After I'd actually talked to him, I waited like 2 months before I actually like had the courage to go through with the interview and do it. But after I did that, I received a lot of hate. I obviously received a lot of kind messages too. And I realized that I had a slight gift for talking to people where it's easy for them to just have a conversation with me and have them feel like themselves. And like, I don't feel the need to pretend to be something that I'm not and make it, this stiff situation. I just feel like we should all sit down and have conversations because at the end of the day, we're all people, and that's exactly what we should all be doing with each other. So that's kind of what got me into that situation with Austin. Then after that, everything went super well. And they asked if, I'd be interested in joining the team. Now, at the time, I had plans to do a different show, but now here I am with Aaron doing the Q Signal. And essentially, we are the ones answering the questions and representing Steinbart Media right now. And one thing that I did sort of want to point out, because this is specifically for volunteers and this is a volunteer movement, a lot of the projects that we have, we work on connecting other people that have creative talents together. So these people that have the ideas and want to put certain projects together, okay, well, we have an editor that can do this. We have a researcher that can do this. We have this person that can do this. And then we're able to sort of set them up for success. And, and their stuff doesn't always have to do with Austin. Like their projects are not, just about promoting Austin at all. It's about the movement and it's about humanity as a whole. And it's about all of us. So I sort of feel like maybe my role is to just kind of remind everybody of that. I'm a mom, and that's what brought me here was once I really obtained the understanding of how just destroyed our world was and the reality of what we actually do face every day and just how corrupt everything is, I knew that I had to do something about it. And there's no way that I could allow my kids to grow up in a world where these are the horrors that I understand that actually exist.
You face that.
Yes.
So one of your things.
Yes.
Your interview with Austin that you did was really great with the
Thank
Camelback
you.
Mountain in the back.
Yes, I appreciate that.
I
very
saw
much.
that. I met you.
I was so nervous while I was doing it too. That was
You didn't show.
That was the first video I'd ever done.
I didn't even-
never, ever done anything like that ever in my life.
We met a couple nights ago, and I didn't even put it together. I'd seen that video when it was fresh, because I always stay on top of anything that's related with this. But that was great. I remember I shared it with other friends, and I thought you did a really good job with it.
Thank you.
For sure. And you've kind of already touched on our next question, and start with you. Can you share with us a little bit, and we've had some conversations, but I know security is an issue as well, but whatever you're comfortable with and whatever you can share about your personal story and how you got here, which you've already done, but also the sacrifices that you're making, because I know there are some of those as well.
Ooh, you're hitting with the deep questions. I knew you were going to bring this up after the
He's been
conversation that
channeling-
we had
he's
the
been
other night,
channeling.
and I knew it too, though. I'll tell you a very similar answer to what I said to one of your questions the other night. As far as being worried about people watching us all the time, and I'm sure the FBI, CIA, whatever, they're spying on us. They want to know everything we're doing. In my personal opinion, I know that I'm not doing anything wrong. So I really don't ever worry a whole lot. I mean, I obviously take the normal amount of precautions for things. I make sure that, my cybersecurity is intact and I have a VPN and all these things. And I pay attention when I'm out and I'm always aware of my surroundings. But at the same time, I'm not ever going to let fear control my life.
You have to rely on manifest destiny.
Yes,
Calvinism.
and I feel like as long as I'm continuing to live authentically as possible and not go outside of that and do what I know in my heart to be right, then that's obviously going to end up working out for me then. So I just honestly try and think about it that way. I don't walk around oh my gosh, they're watching.
It's the same for us.
Everybody can hear me. Ooh, did they hide something in here? I don't think about that kind of stuff. I really don't, because I guess I just, like I said, I have that just contentment in my heart and that peace of mind. I know I'm not doing anything
And you
wrong.
wear the armor of
I
God.
know that and I know that I'm doing nothing other than trying to save my children and their future and the futures of all of the children,
Mm-hmm.
So I really don't. I mean,
It's a
I
righteous
understand
mission.
people could want to hurt me and want to do things to upset me or whatever. And, that's one of the reasons that I've made some of the decisions that I've made and some of the sacrifices that I've made to get here. I'm obviously not around my kids as often as I used to be at the moment, which is a super difficult thing for me. And that has been the biggest trial of all of this for me, for sure. I was a stay-at-home mom for years. So my kids had never had anybody take care of them other than me. And yesterday, my two youngest started daycare for the first time, and I wasn't there.
That's
Yeah,
got to be hard.
And so it's things like that. But I also understand that there's certain sacrifices that I have to make in order to protect them and make sure things don't happen to them. And now for anybody that's been sort of following my story, they know some things that happened with my dog and how he was stolen, and that got me into some animal trafficking stuff, which led me into some child trafficking stuff. And I, sort of thought about it this way. Well, what happened to Austin when he spoke up about the FBI and tried to take them down? They fucking showed up at his house and arrested him, right? That was the first thing they did. So what do you think is going to happen to a mother who has children and makes a decision to blow the lid out of CPS and child trafficking? Like, what's the first thing that you think they're going to do? So I had to make whatever decisions that I had to make sure that my children were protected.
Probably a good decision to raise your voice at that point.
Well, and it is, but at the same time, I still have to make sure that regardless of how loud I speak, it's not going to have negative repercussions for my children, because they're my ultimate goal in all of this, and they're what motivated me to do this. So if I lose sight of that now, then what am I even here for?
Right.
Well, how about you, Aaron? Your personal story, some sacrifice. I know you've made sacrifices too for this.
Yeah, it's actually it's interesting. It's kind of a similar story in the sense of I also have kids, and I have 4 children. Alice has 4 children. So for me, I mean, being through all these ups and downs in my life, and having been through research and through all these conspiracy communities or truther communities, and knowing what it felt like to, no matter what I said to people, for it to just kind of like bounce off of them. Like nothing ever stuck. It didn't matter the subject, if it was 9/11 or JFK or just anything. That, in my opinion, the further back you go in time, the more kind of acceptable these conspiracies become.
Right.
In the mainstream, where people don't see you as crazy. But when it comes to like current day ones, I had at one point been through a lot of like flat earth research and different kinds of I've been through essentially any conspiracy theory that's ever been out there. I've like been hungry to just go research.
You see a rabbit hole.
Not that I'm just like hungry to believe it, because I don't believe the earth is flat, but I was hungry for the research because it taught me critical thinking skills and problem solving skills and how to like figure things out for myself.
Right.
So once I really started going down that path, like my life changed dramatically, to the point where I ended up getting divorced and just being a single dad, kind of in the same boat. And so when Austin came onto the scene, I first watched his videos, and I was just kind of sitting there after work one day, and I don't remember if I saw him on Twitter. I think it was somebody had posted about something negative about him on Twitter, being like a LARP or whatever.
Get a lot
And
of that.
it interested me. So I was like, well, what is this about? Like, why would someone be going out of their way to... So I watched his video because they posted a link to a YouTube video. I'm like, that seems like free marketing to me. But so because of somebody's like negative post about him, I end up getting into watching him, and I watched the first one, and then I just watched all of them right in a row, and then I watched him again, and over the next couple of days, I probably watched him like 3 or 4 more times, and then I made my first video about Austin, and a lot of so basically my all of my backstory is on the videos on my channel, from my job at the time to my kids and my background and a lot of the things I, going way back into my history. So, but yeah, that's the general path that led me to, once I saw Austin's stuff, immediately just recognizing he was the real deal.
Yep.
I had no doubt after those first, it was probably the second watch through that I watched, because I was like really interested. I was like, there's just something about this. Like
Right.
it didn't make sense that he could be saying all those things and doing all this stuff, and it just didn't make any sense. And even now, since he's been arrested, it's not like I've become an apologist where I just excuse these things because I want to believe. It's more like, okay, well, how do they explain away the things that he's done that he hasn't been charged for?
Right.
Right.
And they've only charged him for things that they think that they can get him on and keep him silent for long enough.
But not the things he's blatantly shoved in their face.
What's funny is like I think that they know at the end of this that he's not gonna end up being convicted of anything.
No, because there's easy stuff to get him on.
Yeah, so that's what it is they're just buying time. That's the way I see this whole thing. Is you see how it's lasted. It's been over 6 months
General
since he's
Flynn
been
2.0.
so since his first arrest. It's been over 6 months since he's been on house arrest, and he just got arraigned and within the last
ago.
week. Yeah,
He was
little
on
over a week
9/8, or
Yeah.
no, that was his.
So for 6 months,
like
he went
hectic.
without a charge, but he was on house arrest, and they were controlling everything that he did. see what I'm saying? So it seemed like they were just trying to put him out of the game enough, put him out of his, comfortable zone enough, kind of throw him off enough to slow this down to make something happen. I think they're trying to get Joe Biden elected, or they're trying to stop the election. That's my personal opinion, but I really have no idea what their plan is by slowing Austin down, because the reality is like, unless they kill him, and even if they do, that's only gonna springboard this.
You can kill the man, but
I think
you
they
can't
know
kill
they
the
can't do
idea.
that at this point because there's too much hype around him, and that would only give him martyr status.
And that's what I was going to
Yeah.
say. In my mind,
Yeah.
I was waiting to say that. In my mind,
So
he's
they're
a
not
martyr.
going to do that, but they're going to try to keep playing this crazy card where no, he's just this eccentric, he's crazy, he's
far
got these
from it.
mental issues, and
Well,
it's
at
like,
the same
dude,
point too, why do you think that the mainstream media hasn't touched the subject of Austin? Because the moment that they touch the subject of Austin, then it's going to bring all of this attention to everything that he's spoken about and all of his
And all the
videos and all of this
injustice.
knowledge that he has and all of his rights that are being violated, and just the list just continues to pile and pile and pile up. So then you think, okay, well, usually the only things that they don't want to report on are the things that are actually true. So it's a pretty interesting situation where, and I'll even point this out. Wasn't Jordan Sather on something pretty mainstream, and didn't it not go super well? Well, that's funny.
Yeah, the
That
Comedy
just shows you
Central.
right there. That's the face that they want in front of the movement.
And Dustin Nemos.
Yeah.
They put him on Good Morning America.
Yep.
He was
Yep.
the last person
Yep.
that we would have representing our movement.
Yep.
yeah, I'm not going to lie. Every time I watch those guys, I just think anyone who is even remotely creative and artistic, it can make videos on YouTube. You could make such huge cringe compilations out of what those guys do, the way they speak. It's so cringy. I don't understand. I'm trying to picture the level of person who actually follows them and takes them seriously at this point.
Just the day of the challenge from Dustin Nemos to challenge he said one day 2 or 3 months ago to Austin that he would take him on after Austin had put out an offer to 5
Oh yeah,
of the
see, he
chief
calls them out all the
patriots.
time.
this
That's what
happened
led me to
multiple times.
Austin.
But
was
we had
his
it
attempt
was
to
set
get
up.
the other patriots.
Penny set up the graphics, Finding Nemos,
Yep.
Oh, I love it. I love
and
it.
it was beautiful. And
Penny
Dustin
is an
Nemos-
amazing artist. He is my favorite editor that exists.
Dustin made the challenge that morning, and I've been out there for a long time with my Facebook followers. My 5,000 is always there. And when I saw the challenge that morning, I was all over it. I said, oh my God, Austin is going to eat this up. He's going to be all over this. It wasn't an hour later. Austin said, yes, let's do it. Sorry.
Right, you're pumped. It's okay.
And it was all set up. It was ready to go. They were in communication with Dustin. And Dustin had agreed to it. Unfortunately, Austin was on house arrest and was down to a flip phone for communications. And he had been doing interview after interview with all kinds of people, all over the time. And Dustin was very aware that there was no possibility that he could interact with any high-tech, anything beyond a flip phone.
Mm-hmm.
So Dustin used that as his excuse to skip out on his own challenge. Austin
Oh, of
obviously
course.
immediately
He's
accepted.
not legitimate. So it doesn't matter that essentially everything that we're discussing is communicating through your mind anyway, which removes everything that you're worried about to begin with. It's just absolutely
Well,
ridiculous.
it's interesting because I'm kind of a latecomer to following Austin and his message, and it was those type of guys attacking
Yes.
truthers, raising questions
Yes.
that flack over the target.
It was the
Really-
same thing for me, and that was what landed me my interview with him. I had always had, so when the first big post that I ever made before I had kind of grown my following, and anybody that already had some attention on them had retweeted for me, was this Looking Glass, quantum computing AI post. And I had spent a lot of time doing research on this stuff. And at this time, I had never, ever heard of Austin anything. I knew of Q, obviously, which was the only reason I was on Twitter to begin with. But I had no idea who Austin was. So after I made this post, some people commented on it. And they were like, oh, have you heard of Austin Steinbart? I'm like, who? And so they started sharing some of his YouTube videos. And the ones they shared were, the Quantum one, and then Black Ops, and a couple of the other
What was
ones.
his first video? When you were talking about it, do you remember the name of the first one? I couldn't remember. I don't even.
Well, he made 2 videos prior to making his series of videos leading up to saying that he was Q essentially. His very first one, I think in January, was called "What is QAnon?"
Yes.
And that was
What is QAnon?
Yes.
What is QAnon?
That was
So it
where
was
we
just an
started,
overview of
Was
like,
that we saw
what-
who is
right.
Q2? Was that the same? Who is Q Part 2 or what is QAnon Part 2?
Probably think. I mean, he has a couple part 2s and part 1s in there. You could be thinking of that, but he does have
so
the
there-
what is.
so there's
QAnon
what is
for sure.
QAnon. It starts out where he's talking about Ricky Gervais. That's at the very beginning of that video.
After the Academy Awards?
Yeah,
Awesome.
and then there's Who is Q Part 1 and Who is Q Part 2. So, but the first one, just like what is QAnon, is kind of like a general overview.
It was the beginning of April. that
Right.
he
Yeah, we
started
listened to
posting
who, we
those, yes.
listened to Who is Q Part 2 today.
So one of the things that over the last few days, getting to know the whole team here, that's really struck us is the stress, and you already touched on it. The stress of not, we got a corrupt FBI that we're dealing with. We've got intelligence agents on multiple levels that we've got to deal with. So I know that stress is there for everybody here. I'm curious, putting that stress aside, how does it feel to be attacked by the very people within the movement, the truther movement, the QAnon movement that you're trying to fight for? How's that feel on a daily basis? It's gotta be difficult.
I personally struggled in the beginning of, officially choosing sides, whatever, even though I think it's stupid and I think that we should all be on the same side, because at the end of the day, at this point in time, the identity of Q is irrelevant. Like, we need to worry about waking up the rest of the world.
It's
we don't
relevant
need,
because he's in jail.
but I just up until the point when I had my following and I was going through all this, it wasn't at a point where it was relevant, is what I
Okay.
mean to say.
Sure.
It didn't matter what my opinions were. It wasn't.
but this
Who
thing-
cares? It was just another topic for people to argue over. So I purposely stayed away from that because, like I said, I just felt like it was sort of irrelevant to the topic. But as I saw all these people begin to hound on him and attack him, I could not say anything about it. So that's when I really started to speak up, because I had already had my own, synchronicities and things that I understood about everything that was going on, where I believed enough where I didn't need to know anymore to still be able to stand up for somebody who was obviously being treated extremely unfairly
Well,
in
he's somebody
this
who's-
type of situation,
He's put his whole self as
Yes.
Q.
Yes.
And our motto is where we go one, we go all.
Yes.
And a lot of times I think it should be WWG1, WGWOA
Yes.
without
Right.
Austin.
Yes. And you know what really got me was when he posted his sacrifices video and talked about everything that happened with his wife, and people were just so cruel and just saying that absolutely most terrible things. And I remember one of the first things that I said to him during the conversation that I had with him was wow, I just want you to know that just like a normal human being, I completely understand how difficult it was for you to make that video, and what an extreme amount of respect that I have for you, and also what I think a good idea it was, because everyone needs to understand that you are just a regular human being and that you're dealing with the same type of stress and the same type of sacrifices, that everybody else is.
For him to be producing anything during that time
Yes.
was amazing to me.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so for me, once I made that decision and after I did my interview, I was not prepared fully for the backlash. Look, I knew some people were going to be pissed off. I knew some people weren't going to be completely happy with everything I had to say, but I really didn't expect them to just completely write me off and turn their back. And that's exactly what happened. And I tell you what, you really learn who your friends are in these types of
Yeah, absolutely.
situations.
You sure do.
And it's honestly even been a difficult situation with me for my family. I mean, they don't all necessarily support everything that I'm doing or that we're
Mine
doing,
don't support me at all.
understand why I'm making some of the decisions that I'm making or some of the sacrifices that I'm making, because they don't. And I mean, I don't blame them. They don't have all the knowledge that's in my brain, and I specifically don't give it to them because it would probably cripple them, because
Right.
the truth is painful and it sucks. And it's absolutely crushing to your soul. So I kind of try and hand that out sparingly to everybody.
It's in the Q post. They say that the truth would put most people in the hospital.
It would, absolutely.
It's in
Absolutely.
a post, and it is. That's the case. It's that bad.
So on the topic of stress, for me, unfortunately, I have had a dysfunctional sort of upbringing, and I have been used to an abnormal amount of stress, which is not like your average everyday American person. So for me, I almost operate better in chaos and extreme situations of stress than I do in your everyday normal situations. So I probably am able to cope with and handle all of this extra stress and all these crazy situations a little bit better than a lot of people normally would.
you
But
see-
that's only because I've paid a heavy price to
See how
get
you would
here.
gravitate towards this.
Yes,
knowing those
Absolutely.
things.
Absolutely.
Aaron, you said that you've been with the conspiracy movement or the truth movement for a long time. How does it feel to you to be attacked by it as you put yourself out there and try and get us to some truth?
Well, I'm not gonna lie. At first, I thought it was absolutely hilarious that I had been following these guys for so long and giving them the benefit of the doubt that they were critical thinkers, that they would be willing to talk it out reasonably. And when I presented them with information and questions, and they met me with just blocking me,
Yeah.
it told me very clearly that I had just been red pilled for a second time. So that's what I experienced from the beginning of all of this with Austin. I had a blast, especially at the point when Austin first reached out to me. I was like, dude, it's all worth it. It's all been worth it. I took all the slings and arrows. Like, he thinks I'm doing a good job. So then, like, we started talking, and Penny and Mike, and it just blew up from there. And I felt so honored to just be kind of like on the front lines with Austin, having his back, showing people how to think for themselves, not just out there trying to troll people, but actually asking them logical questions like, okay, so if he's such a LARP, why is it that they've only mentioned in the affidavit in Austin's case about him threatening the Queen of Greenland, or the Queen of Denmark, essentially, sorry, the Queen of Denmark, threatening her with sending U.S. military JSOC up in there to light her up and take her cookies.
You got 30 days.
I thought that was very interesting that they felt that that was egregious enough to mention it, but not to actually charge him with threatening like
Well,
the
silly goose.
the sovereign sitting, of a foreign country. Like anybody else who does that in earnest on, you get a visit from the FBI, but then you get charged with, threatening.
International.
Right, that's
Yes.
that's a huge crime.
Right.
If I did
Right,
something
against
like
Like
that,
the
I
Secret
know I would go
Service
to
would
jail
show up on
immediately.
your doorstep
So
here in
nobody
the
to this day
United
can
It might be
explain to
someone
me
above them.
how it is that he has not been charged with that. Because that, to me, seems like the biggest one of the things that he's done.
Yeah.
As far as
One of many.
threats that
Claiming
he's
to be a
made on the
CIA agent
internet.
Absolutely.
is another one. Just
So-
you
so-
can't claim to be an agent of a spy.
So for
agency.
me, all this has done is just galvanize my resolve as I've gone through this. It's made me, I don't want to say more skeptical of just people in general, but it seems like the closer I get to the truth, the more there's just people that kind of like come in and try to disrupt
Yes.
and tear you away from things. And, for me, as long as I'm just focused on the goal of my goal has always been for myself since I started my awakening was to just follow my own understanding of information as I see it, and not to be. I leave myself open to be convinced of something else when I'm presented with, a large amount of information. I mean, just like think of like how a court proceeding works or how we look at QAnon in general. It's not about any one specific piece of evidence, but it's about an abundance of circumstantial evidence, right? Everything's kind of circumstantial. Any one thing could be taken and be like, and explained away. But when you take a vast majority of these and you say these are all just coincidences, because if you have more than one, it has to be a coincidence that these are tied to the same thing. So when you have 30 or 40 or 50 coincidences that seem pretty significant, but not above like the norm if it was just on its own. But when you put them all together, that's how you would make a case in the court of law anyways. So for me, it's just that I looked at it unbiasedly. I had no tie to the Q movement in a sense of like, I wasn't like tied to Jordan Sather or, Space Shot 76 or any of these like big presenters.
Right.
I was just listening to what they said, like when I was at work and I was bored and I was like, I'll put someone on who's talking about Q, even though I was already well aware and I'd read the posts for myself. I didn't need them to tell me anything, but it's like, I'm just bored and I'll listen to updates once in a while. But these guys never were more than just, run of the mill kind of like.
Well, they're like you and me, and they're like anybody else. They really
Yeah.
are just people who have the voice and the ability and the willingness to go out and digest.
And so
it
just
for
in the same
themselves.
way, I don't think of myself as anyone special. I never thought of them as anyone special. We're just out here talking about information. And if people find the information that we're putting out there or the way that we present it or something, that draws them into listening to it, great. That's fine for me. I only care about ending this corruption on the earth so that my kids can grow up in a world free of this crap, where I don't have to raise them, teaching them about these things that go on still when, they're in their, be careful when you go here because you might get trafficked. You know what I mean? Like, I think we can end all of that stuff, and especially under Trump, and especially with Austin's leadership. So, yeah, I'm on board with all of this, and I have been from the beginning. And so I've
We'll
had
take the
nothing.
arrows.
I've had nothing but a blast. Like, the moment they started attacking me, it just totally legitimized it for me.
The keystone
Because
of the
they would have
whole
had no
movement.
reason to attack me if they didn't feel threatened.
Well, and
in some
essentially
way.
all it's doing is bringing more eyes on the issues that need attention. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
It's
if we
great
have
for me.
to kind of throw ourselves in front of the bus for that to happen, then so be it. You
But
know?
the keystone of this whole thing is we all are to think for ourselves.
Yes.
Right.
And nobody's better than anybody else. People
See, and
have
that's the
their
thing, we're all
voices,
the
but
same.
there's no authority.
Yes.
You have to take in every angle. You have to take in every bit, and then you make your own assessment. And eventually, if you do it, we come to the same conclusions. If we're all doing that, we're able to link up. But nobody criticizes anybody else in this movement. If you're doing it the right way for your take on it, you share it with other people, and then it allows them to have more of an angle. Every angle is appreciated.
One of the issues that I had actually about that, thinking about it now, just with, some of the people that sort of came at me after all these things happened, is that as, a truther myself and somebody who does deep research and loves falling down as many rabbit holes as she possibly can, there were conclusions that I had come to and truths that I had discovered where, in my personal opinion, say I've only been doing this for 9 months. It seems impossible to me that people that have been doing this for 3.5 years could not even come close to the same conclusions and be pushing certain narratives that are just so obviously not the case or not the truth. And so for me, that was a big red flag, and why I just didn't even worry about paying any attention to some of these people, because it was obvious that they were not essentially who they were claiming to be. But regardless of that, I left them alone because it's not my business, and I just let them do what they need to do. And I'm not going to be the person that goes on there and, says all those bad things, whatever, and starts calling people out. I just did, minded my own business and did what I had to do. But then the moment that I posted that I was doing an interview with Austin, this was before our interview was even posted. I just posted, heads up, this is what's going on right now. All of a sudden, all these same people that I had avoided saying anything to because it wasn't my place and because we should all mind our own business and because these opinions don't really matter at the end of the day, ascended upon my Twitter page and were immediately calling me out and saying all kinds of ridiculous things. And it just kind of made me chuckle because it just shows at the end of the day, too, what type of people they are. I did nothing wrong. I did nothing but search for the truth. And people like to criticize a little bit about some of the questions that I asked. But here's what I tell those people. Okay, if these are the questions that you need asked, then why don't you message Austin and you ask him yourself?
Or empower yourself to get in front of him like I have.
Yes, because when I did that interview with him, I wasn't there doing that interview for the world. I was there doing that interview for me. This was about my search of truth and the answers that I felt like I wanted to, or the questions that I wanted to hear his answers to, so then I could gauge my own certain opinions and perceptions. Because I knew as soon as I sat down with him and had a chance to look him in the eyes and have these conversations, and I would know if it was able to flow or if there were going to be, all these cuts because he didn't know the answer, whatever. And it was just boom, boom. We never even stopped. We just ran straight through
That's
the
how
whole
he does.
entire time.
He's transparent.
Yep.
If he doesn't know he knows the answer.
Yep, he
Sometimes
knows it.
he
He
won't
doesn't want to
share
say
the
it,
answer,
yes,
but he'll
yes.
tell you.
Yes.
That's something I'll get to later.
Yes.
It's something that I know that you need to know the answer to. You asked it for valid reasons, but I'm not ready yet to share this with you.
Just like he did with my Antarctica stuff and, a bunch of other topics. If he couldn't touch on exactly what I asked, then he would make sure that was known, but he would still give you just enough where you can take some of those crumbs and go figure those things out on your own.
He almost always finishes with, I will
Yes.
bring this to you.
Yes.
There are more things I can share with you, but I can't right now.
Well, and that's what people have to realize too, is that one thing that I even remember him specifically saying during my interview was, I'm leaving these breadcrumbs for you guys to follow. If you think about this like a military operation with this classified information, there are things that they cannot divulge. There are things that they cannot say. The only way that they can disseminate this information to you is for them to leave just enough breadcrumbs where it doesn't paint a picture, but it's up to you and your mind to be able to do the research and paint that picture for them, and then give that picture to the people, because they're not going to be able to do it. I mean, imagine what would happen to Trump right now if he came out, said something crazy about, being part of the QAnon movement. They would annihilate him.
Right.
They would absolutely annihilate
to
him. And
be
they would make sure
drip,
he was the one
drip,
hanging for treason instead of Obama and Hillary, which is absolutely absurd. So there's so many reasons that we have to do these things, but this is probably a good moment of encouragement for everybody to go back through and watch all of Austin's videos and pay attention and listen to the things that he says and think about multiple meanings, because everything is not always what it seems, and you could be missing some valuable pieces of information.
And if you're not paying attention, you should, because it's quite a show.
Yes,
And it's amazing when you are tuned in.
absolutely.
So it sounds like on maybe a little bit bigger level than Luke and I, you've both experienced the flak over the target
Oh boy, yeah.
phenomenon.
Oh, yeah.
And it hasn't deterred you.
When I got my first death threat after talking about time travel, like I knew I was on to something for sure, for sure. I had people trying to kill me all the time. It was absolutely ridiculous.
I had people trying to kill me all the time.
So ridiculous.
Yeah,
Yeah, I just
Casual.
find if you take everything kind of like with a grain of salt.
Yeah, it's
you
just
know,
like, whatever.
kind of
And you
like,
wear the breastplate of
yeah,
righteousness.
you just like kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, that's fine. Like let them have, just as long as you don't get angry at people,
Right.
and you let them say what they're gonna say, and you're just like, don't take it personal,
No.
you know.
Red pilling's
It
red
just
pill.
it really just kind of rolls off you, and you move on, and before you know it, they end up coming to you a year later and be like, hey, I just wanted to let you know I really hated you last year, but
Right.
I ended up going through the information. I just wanted to apologize for the things I said. I'm like, bro, I don't even remember what you're talking
Right?
about.
You know
but-
how many
but
of
it's
you
all
have
good.
shit on
Like,
me
welcome to
since
the
then?
team.
I forgot.
Glad to have you. It's cool to have
I
people.
would say I don't remember, but I would still remember.
So, and that's part of our passion, Luke and I, is we've been very entrenched in the QAnon movement. We're guys that at one point were watching Praying Medics videos. We were watching Jordan Sather's tweets for decodes. I think we want to reach those people. We love them. They're attacking us, but we love them, and we want to bring them
Sather
along.
particularly was a tough topic for me because I didn't realize that when I had my following that he and I had some mutual friends. And I took it pretty personally. Like I'd never ever said a word about him. I get my mouth shut. Same thing with Austin. I didn't ever go after anybody. And as soon as I posted that thing about Austin, he was one of the first people to like retweet it and say some crappy stuff about it, right? And so that was when I got some other messages from other people, and I realized in that moment, like, we all may have different opinions and we all may have like different views, but at the end of the day, like we really do all want the same thing, And one of the conversations that I had with his friends was she just was like, look, like I know both of you. Like I know him on a deep level and I know you on a deep level, and I'm telling you that like both of your hearts are pure and both of your intentions are pure, and like you're just essentially getting this all cut up in just the crap of all of it, and like the sooner that you guys can let that go, and it, at that time I was like, okay, but then as soon as he'd say something else, I'd kind of go off. And now honestly looking back, I wish I would have handled that situation a little bit differently than I did. I wish I would have been probably a little bit more calm and a little bit more peaceful, but at the same time, I felt like super attacked, and it was the first person that really came at me, and it was someone that I didn't expect to, So I took that one a little bit hard.
This is
But-
Jordan Sather.
Yes, but it's interesting, like I said, to find what a small world it actually is. Like half of these people that are out here, like bashing us have no idea that like their best friends are great friends with all of us,
I had a serious back and forth with Dylan Wheeler before in person, before I knew who he was. He just showed up in South Dakota at a bar with me and a bunch of other
We're
friends.
not talking about Dylan.
Well, when he came up,
Not to cut you off, but I'm not talking about Dylan. I got beef
But
with
that's-
Dylan. If you want to talk about it, Dylan, hit me up. I'll interview you too.
let's do that.
We'll talk all day.
I got issues with Dylan.
I do too.
So,
but it was interesting to have. I didn't know who he was, and then to have this back and forth, and then he showed his true colors very shortly thereafter.
In an effort to reach our truther friends and our long time, we call them Team Where We Go When We Go All friends, we think that the quantum internet is the concept that people need to wrap their brains around in order to get past whatever blocks that they have for even considering this message. Do you have any? We think it's an Occam's razor for the entire operation, the quantum internet and the ability to post data back through time.
It's the simplest solution.
Well, in the way that I think about the quantum internet, so think about the ability to send messages back in time, the level that Austin's using the quantum internet is something that we may not particularly have access to, say, at the beginning of its use. It would more just be like free Wi-Fi for everybody,
Right.
meaning you just always have an internet connection anywhere you go, kind of deal. That's how I see its initial implementation.
And decentralizing the
think
data
about
hubs.
this. Like Austin's mentioned specifically that you can't just change time as much as you want. You can't just change. You can't just send messages back to the past for people to just make all these changes, because it does have ripple effects throughout the years, and it changes futures. It changes outcomes.
Very careful.
And so all of that has to be calculated. Everything. So nobody's allowed to essentially like say Austin in the future, 40 years now in the future, who is the guy running the operation currently, and he's sending messages back to himself presently. I guarantee you there are laws or there are things in place for him using that he cannot send certain things.
Hence the Internet
Oh,
Bill
it
of
has to be
Rights.
done.
And
that
Austin's
he
made this
discusses
point
and things
multiple
like
times that they never give him, meaning the DIA or Q Plus or whoever, never gives him any more information than what's necessary to keep him alive and to complete the mission.
Just gets
That's
enough-
it. That's
just
all
enough
they
not to
ever give
die.
him. They never give him more than that.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of just my overview on that.
Any communication has to be gone over with a fine tooth comb. Anything that gets brought back to help affect the future, it needs to be done with scientific precision, or it will cause a mess of everything.
You know, I like to sort of reference certain things when I'm trying to explain like quantum internet and things like that to people that have like really no quite perception of the way that, you know, qubits and things like that actually work yet. But one thing that they talk about is the ability to go back in through time and, you know, view the world through certain people's eyes and see what was happening in that
viewing.
moment. Yes, and that's exactly what I relate it to. So essentially just remove the quantum internet, you know, technical aspect of it for a minute, if that will make it easier for
And look
some
at it
people to
through an
understand.
esoteric filter.
Yes, and look at it through maybe like a bit of exactly esoteric, spiritual filter, whatever it is that you want to, what you want to call it, however you relate to it. But it's essentially just like remote viewing. And the CIA actually dropped this entire thing back in like the end of the 80s or beginning of the 90s, that I believe. And it was all about essentially how they teach certain people that already sort of have these gifts to control their mind and be able to do remote viewing and do time travel. And it's not essentially this
declassified.
machine and things that people think it is that you know jump into and then all of a sudden, you know, you're standing in the middle of JFK's assassination, you know, like it's absolutely nothing like that. But people see movies like, you know, Hot Tub Time Machine and like Back to the Future and things, and they assume that like that's exactly how these things work, when in the reality how it actually operates is probably beyond most of our levels of understanding.
I like how you said that.
And people have, you know, think of the people that have difficulty with a normal CPU in front of you, right? These quantum systems are capable of deciphering a problem that would take a normal operating system hundreds of thousands of years to figure out. Hundreds of thousands of years to find the
400,000
answer to
years?
a problem. Hundreds of
3
thousands,
minutes.
right? Exactly. That a quantum computer can find in, you know, in less than 60 seconds. And it's so people just need to understand that those things are possibilities. And once they can accept the basis of that, then the whole theory of everything that's happening and time travel and all these things that are associated with it, I think would be able to come a little bit easier to them. Once they realize that these things are in fact possible. We're not making this up. This is not just some crazy terms that we created to try and get everyone to believe what we're doing. Like these things are real and these things can be used by anybody. And in fact, they've been used by the CIA and our government against us for a very long time. So it's about time that somebody stood up and used these things that they've been trying to harm us with for centuries against them to finally take them down and turn them into dust, you know?
Yeah. We were real excited in the last couple of days and actually have had some of our more resistant truther friends reaching out a little bit because of the government announcing the Quantum Initiative.
Yes.
.gov
Interesting,
site.
right?
Quantum.gov, yeah.
Yeah,
Very
I love
interesting.
it.
I thought
So that's a good place for people to go who struggle with this, like myself, and still need to learn. Your channel, obviously.
I have to
and
send
all
you
the-
my AI quantum looking glass post read. You'll love it.
Yeah,
I
please
saved
do.
it for
Please
sure.
do.
Yes,
I need
that'll
to
be
learn.
good for you.
Do you have any other suggestions for sources where maybe these resistant QAnon truthers can go to learn about the quantum technology that's involved?
Yeah, I would say definitely start with looking. But this is what's always kind of, I don't want to say frustrating, but just interesting for me, is that these people seem to have some sort of resistance to this quantum kind of thing because it's somehow directly tied to Austin. Maybe that seems, but But the reality is that Project Looking Glass is mentioned multiple times in Q posts.
Absolutely.
Project Looking Glass was
So-
originally established in 1956.
So if it's already pretty much public record that Project Looking Glass is based on quantum technology, I don't see what the disconnect there is,
Right.
and how we're not already talking about quantum.
Well, here's
It
an
just seems like
interesting-
they're resistant to it because, I'll be honest, I grew up in a house where, I was told one day I would be forced to receive the mark of the beast, and it was all going to be technology based,
Right.
and whereas there's going to be one world currency and all this stuff. So it put this fear in me instead of just kind of looking at things from a neutral perspective and kind of like listening to what he's saying. But when I started seeing the implementations of this technology and the fact that the technology itself, in my now opinion, is that it's just more neutral. It depends on who's in control of it. Who is the person, who is it that we're trusting to use this technology? Because any technology could be used for good or bad.
Right.
It just depends on how we choose to use it.
Yep.
So if we're going to blame it on technology, it's no different from, blaming a gun for shooting somebody instead of blaming the person. It's the exact same thing. You can follow that down no matter how sophisticated technology gets, whether it's past quantum. It has to do with who's in control of it.
Right.
And how much do we trust them, and how far has humanity come?
And where do you
what do
let
we
it-
expect from our leaders? And what are we willing to do to make sure that they do exactly what's best for all of us?
Yep.
And hold them accountable. Going forward, that's how technology is going to have to be implemented, is only when we are willing to do exactly what we're doing right now, which is to speak about these things, the truth of these matters, whether it's the government pushing down on us, and let's say we get this quantum internet, but then all of a sudden, groups within the government try to take control of it for themselves and take it away from the military or take it away from whoever, and they make this whole big thing about it. And it's like, are we just going to let the government come in, the politicians come in, and just steamroll our rights again? Now we have this free internet, but now they want to restrict it and tell us what we can and can't say on that internet. And we're going to be back in the same boat that we are now. It's just going to be free internet. It'd be no different. So we have to inspire people to change their mindset. Realistically, that's what this comes down to, is the mindset from slavery and transitioning into one of freedom. Because the average person is in the mindset of slavery right now. They see themselves as a slave, whether they acknowledge it or not. They go to their job every day like a diligent person. They pay their taxes. They pay their bills. They do everything that the government tells them they have to do. And they think that that is a normal life that we were meant to live here.
Right.
They've given up their sovereignty.
And people like us have realized, like, there's so much more to this life that when you actually live it freely and by making your own rules. And I make my own rules based off of how I would want other people to treat me. And so because I'm at a high enough level of, like, I just have, what do you call, like, good social interaction skills, where you just don't go above and beyond and out of your way to start some problems when there aren't any problems.
Emotional
You know what I mean?
intelligence.
When we can kind of, like, just get everyone to calm down a little bit and just remember what it's like to talk to people rationally, even if you disagree with them, and not think of them as like your enemy or somebody to hate, but somebody to try to find some middle ground with, to where you can at least be around each other. You
Have
know what I mean? We
conversation.
have to get people back to this common strain of reality where we don't see politicians as our gods. We don't see celebrities as our gods. We don't see, countries,
see the
kings,
demagogues.
borders. We don't see any of these things as our gods, but we see ourselves as responsible for ourselves. So if that makes us each individually our own God, maybe that is the way we should see ourselves, as if we're all equal, if we're all
Sovereign.
created equal and we're sovereign, and God is also sovereign, or the idea of there being this omnipotent being would also be sovereign. So if we're actually sovereign people, why don't we just look at ourselves as an extension of God,
Yep,
right?
exactly.
We are all God, right? And if that's
I
the
see it
case, then
that
we
way.
treat each other equally, no matter the situation. Now, if we agree on these rules where if I kill you for no reason, then I deserve to die for that, then that's what the consequences are. And so if we start changing the laws, you know what I mean? So I just think it comes down to, like, almost like a natural way of being, where
It's called natural law.
nobody just gets away with going and killing somebody in a natural kind of setting without there being repercussions.
Also, people don't get charged and fined for doing things that don't harm other people.
Yeah,
Exactly. So, like, if I get
innocent
pulled
until
over-
proven guilty
Right.
in a
there-
court of
if
law,
there's-
which
if
is
there-
how it should
if
be.
there's no victim, there's no crime.
So society that's more
That's natural law.
much more lenient on things that have nothing to do with other people. So if I, for example, live in a state now where, say, marijuana is illegal or alcohol is banned in certain counties, and I do something that has nothing to do with anyone else, and I'm in my own house, and for some reason the neighbors just call the cops on me, and they smell the pot in the house, and all of a sudden I get taken to jail
It's not right.
for doing something that has nothing to do
It
with
didn't harm
anyone else.
anybody.
So these types of situations, while that might be a bit of an outlier, in general,
That's constitutional
unless you're actually using it like, oh, I'm going to go drink a bunch of alcohol so that I can be worked up enough to go fight somebody. You know what I mean? Then you're using it as like a tool. But the reality is most people just drink to drink, and most people just smoke to smoke, or they do whatever, and they get caught up in situations. You look at the situation, the substance makes no difference. If the person did it or not did it, they still committed the act.
The right
let's
to
look at the
swing
act.
your fists
Right.
ends at the tip of my nose.
Right. So there's definitely like very like just simple ways to look at life where it's almost like think of how things play out on the school grounds in like kindergarten, you know what I mean? Where like kids have problems with each other, they talk or they like wrestle, and then they're best friends. You know what I mean? Like we've gotten so far away from this where we're so caught up on trying to get one over on somebody else where, ooh, they broke this law. Oh, my neighbor, he damaged my fence. Now I'm going to sue him and also for this and
He
for
stole my Trump
emotional
sign.
damage. And so they always try to get whatever they can out of somebody else instead of like trying to make situations better. People's main focus always seems to try to make it about themselves, which inevitably just makes it worse because the only way a situation gets better if it's a win-win. It's got to be a win for me, a win for you, a win for everybody involved. That's how I think Donald Trump looks at deals. That's how he deals with foreign policy. That's how he deals with people.
believe that.
Is he's not just looking to get something for himself. He's looking for all parties involved to get, like he's still representing his portion, which is the United States, but he wants everybody to still have a fair deal.
Even if it means moving his chess piece to challenge them to feel like they're getting a raw deal
Yep.
for a minute, so that they'll realize that in the end that it's going to work out for them too, even though they got challenged and put in a hard
Right.
spot for a second.
So that's kind of my approach to life is always just trying to give everyone a fair shake about things. And, I deal with the Pharisees in the same way. Even when they attack, of course I'll push back. Be like, listen, if you guys really got a problem, you little idiots, why don't we just have an interview? Like, yeah, we'll call them names once in a while. We joke around. But at the end of the day, they know that all we've ever asked for is like, why don't you just sit down and talk with us? If you guys
And
really
there's
believe
a
what you're
list
saying,
of 8 or 9 people
and you're willing
Right.
to,
that won't.
so what is stopping them? Is it really because this is the two I would say like main trains of thought on this. It's either one,
Money.
they genuinely believe that they are too good for us,
That's not it.
or they're afraid.
And
It's
they're-
one or the other.
They're
Yes.
afraid because they're patriots.
Right, because
PAY.
they know that
As
if they
soon
were to
as they
actually
lose-
speak about Austin's
lose
case,
their-
They've
they
stuck
wouldn't know
so
what they're
hard to
talking
their
about.
ground that now it would actually behoove them to do that, to be the first one of them.
Imagine though how like for anybody out there that needs to change sides, like imagine what people will think of you if you do it. Imagine the respect that they'll have for
Yeah,
you
the first
for
one.
being able to come forward and be like,
The first one that
"But
does
I was
it will be
wrong.
the best one
I'm
of them
sorry.
all. The rest of them
I'm telling
probably
you, and nobody else will
fall.
care. It's just like the deal that if 2 people are involved with a crime, the cops go to one person, and then the other one say, both of you
What's your
flipped. We'll
story?
give the deal, whatever. It's the same type of situation. Like the first person that does it is going to be the best off out of everybody.
Absolutely. They-
So
they
it's
should
time
be-
to
they should
suck
be
it up and
racing.
eat it now. Like
They
you're
should
wasting
be racing
time.
to get to be that guy right now.
Yep.
If I was one of those people, it's
Oh,
like
I'll take this moment and say, hey, Jordan, if you would like to come and do an interview with me, I would still gladly do it with you. And it would be super peaceful and we could all come together and show some unity. So,
Jordan.
yeah, do Jordan's.
Wow, that is brave.
I told you. I
Not
already
brave
said I
of you to
felt
take
bad
him
about
on.
how I handled that, though. And I
He
would like
doesn't.
an opportunity to make it right. So if he is, man enough to come and have a conversation with me, then
That's
let's
being
do
a
it.
pretty solid person because
I'll
that's
do it in a
taking.
heartbeat. I'll interview anybody. I don't care because I don't have anything to hide.
We believe in you, Jordan. We think you got the balls for this.
I don't think you deserve it.
I may not personally like you, but that's a pretty honest offer there. So
But all of you,
you're gonna kind
all
of look
you
like an
Pharisees,
a-hole if you don't
Anybody.
take that.
Not
all
just
of you
Jordan.
patriots, you should be running to be the first one because the rest you'll all be left behind. It's a matter of time. The clock's ticking for all of you, except the first one to step up, have the balls to stand up for what's right and get behind Austin. At least give him his airspace. None of you would even answer the call for an interview.
You don't even have to get behind Austin. Let's
But they
just
wouldn't.
talk.
He said, "Come to Phoenix. any and all of you, time and place you're choosing, all of you at once. I don't care. I'll interview anytime, anywhere, however many of you come. Not one of you.
Well, he was on house arrest, so I'll raise the stakes. I'll fly to you, Jordan. You don't even have to come to Arizona. Forget that. I'll come there. If it's an excuse of money, nothing, we'll all do it. This is like the super time where we all need to be like squashing these beefs and coming together. Like I said the same thing earlier today on Twitter. Like we are way too far into this to be spending this much time with other patriots at each other's throats. Like essentially, you know, who we think who is whatever at this point in that scheme of things doesn't matter. We all want the same things. We're all fighting to end the corruption. We're all fighting to end child trafficking. We're all fighting to end, you know, essential slavery of all of humanity. Like, why can we not do that together? Like, why should our opinion of who this person might be have this much weight where it causes everything to fall apart? And you then risk your inability to bring anybody over that's on the other side and that has this information, because then as soon as they, you know, come and find your content or on your pages, all they see are you bashing all these people or all, you know, going back and forth. And that's not going to be something that is necessarily attractive to them. And that's not what's going to draw them into this movement. So I'm like a big believer in squashing this stuff. And I'm like just unbiased enough that I feel like I can do it. Like, look, man, I don't care whose side you're on. None of that. Like, you're against pedophilia, right? You want to end child trafficking,
Something we
right?
can all
Like you're
identify on.
against, you know, human and animal sacrifice, right? Like as long as we have a couple of these bases covered, we should be able to have completely normal conversations without there being any type of a dramatic undertone to any of it. So that's what I feel, and I think that we need to be getting into more of those situations. Like
Okay.
people even said with my interview with Austin, well, how's that interview when you agree with everything he said? I'm like, all right, well, next time I'll put a whole list of topics about things I know we don't agree about, and we'll have a conversation about it, just so you can see that it's not about always agreeing with somebody. It's about being able to be heard and being willing to listen, to understand, not just to respond.
Sure, yeah.
And I'll put the same offer out there to Jordan Sather. If he's not comfortable talking to Steinbart Media Group and you'd like to talk to some independent truthers, we've got questions, and we'd be happy to discuss them with you and
Please.
maybe offer you the chance to show us the light if you wanted to. I have a question that I know that you're not going to have a solid answer for. So don't worry, there's no pressure here. But as people have been following QAnon along for a very long time, one of our big focuses has always been how many more of us are there? How many more of us are out there? You know, we watch QMAP and see how many people are on there at one point, and we get excited as the number grows up. From your perspective, do you have any kind of guess in our country or worldwide what the impact has been of Austin? How many people his message is currently reaching?
No, I can't like speak for Austin's message particularly, but I can say like for everything that this movement is going for as a whole, like they are working very, very hard to hide these numbers for us. I've been into paying attention to marketing and numbers and these things for quite a while. And so when I had my Twitter, it was just like normal for me to look at my analytics and pay attention to these different things. And so there was no way that these things mathematically line up. Absolutely no way.
Look at
And
the
so then
poll
when
numbers.
yeah, exactly. So then when all of a sudden you look and you have, you know, 10 million impressions and then your things only have like 2 likes, you know, and like there's absolutely no way that those things are accurate. Then another thing, I was watching one of Trump's debates and someone else was at my house and they were watching it through their phone on like one of the news outlets, and I was watching it through my phone on a different one. And at one point mine showed 150,000 people watching, right? But then it changed and went back down to 50, and then the other person that was at my house that was watching it, it said 33,000.
Yeah, so there's no consistency anyway.
And it is.
And it jumps all
and
over
why
like
would
a
that
popcorn.
number jump all the way up there, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, we got to get rid of that. Like we've got to hide that. Like there are so many more of us than people realize, and the only reason that a lot of people are afraid to speak up is because they're afraid of losing their jobs and their lives and their families. Like
Reputation.
the moment some of these people say that they support Trump, they understand that they will lose everything, because unfortunately, like that's just the climate that we happen to be in certain circumstances. You cannot openly support some of these things without worrying about the repercussions, and we need to get past that point. And enough of us need to start speaking out where they can't do anything about it anymore. And there's enough of us using our voice where there's no more repercussions that they can use against the rest of us. And the more of us that have the courage to speak out about these things and take that opportunity and have that voice, the more it's going to give other people the courage to do the same thing. And at this point, it's not about, I mean, obviously we do want to use Austin's issue to point out, you know, the injustices and the violations of his constitutional rights and all of these other things. But we still have to understand that this is literally about waking everybody else up before the election as well. And it's going to be about more than that. It's going to be about all of this. So we kind of have to employ all of that. But I still feel that way more people are aware of everything that's going on than what they're willing to discuss, for
Whatever
sure.
the number is, it's bigger than they're
Oh, yes.
telling us.
Yes, for sure.
So we had the parallels between supporting Donald Trump during the campaign and early in his presidency and supporting QAnon as the operation began and started to get into the public consciousness. And now Austin and Austin's message, the parallels are just so obvious to the people that have been on that ride that I think we're all pretty convicted in it. There's speaking of the Pharisees, speaking of the narrative herders, the cartoons that are telling everybody that Austin. The most amazing thing to me is that they insist that he's not relevant.
Well, they're really just telling you what to believe about him. They're not asking you to go look at his
It's pretty easy for
information
them to
and
do that
think
now.
about it for yourself. They're saying, if you don't think that he's a LARP like I do, please unfollow me. Please just go away. I don't even want to waste my time with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty sad.
It's pathetic.
It's
And if I could give you a chance just to run down the common charges that they make, the common inconsistent charges that they make.
No one's like,
The first thing they call him is a LARP. What would be your response to the entrenched team where we go one, we go all to their accusations of him being a LARP?
well, and the LARP is stupid. How many times have they said to people too, you're watching a movie? Not everything that you necessarily see played out is going to be exactly how it is. And it's just who else says disinformation is necessary? Do you really think they're going to tell you the whole entire plan this whole entire time and still
Right.
have it come off successfully? Absolutely not. Absolutely
my main
not.
question to people is if you really believe that you know the QAnon operation better than anybody else and you have it all figured out and you know what's going on, I applaud you. You're the only one out there who exists other than the actual people who are running the operation. So
That's exactly what I was
bravo
thinking
on
as
that.
you said that. I was thinking, that would be a rare breed.
So for my perspective on this, as it comes to Austin, all I've ever asked people to do is look at his information, judge it for yourself, and listen to the points I've had to make about it over the months here. And at the very least, why wouldn't you just not remain neutral and just say, I'm not going to have an opinion on it either way. I'll follow it. I'll watch the show, as we say. But if there's not enough evidence there for you to make a solid stance either way, then why not just remain neutral instead of trying to play it safe and be like, oh, well, I'm just going to stay on the shill train, or, calling him a LARP and a shill and all this crap. It's CIA. And I've heard him called everything.
Yeah.
And even
Mentally
FBI.
ill.
They've called him
Mentally
FBI, literally the people who are attacking him.
Yes.
he's,
Took him
uh,
in
But he's a part of
custody.
their group, so they're just making
his goal is to splinter the
that makes a
FBI
lot
into
of
1,000
sense.
pieces, just as Kennedy promised he would.
Right.
Yeah. And,
So they're
and
not really
as
on the
hard
same
as
page.
Austin has gone against the FBI and the CIA, to hear those kinds of charges leveled against him, I don't even know where they come up with this
It's
stuff.
just
It just doesn't make
mind-boggling.
sense. He claimed to be DIA. So if he was a CIA operative claiming to be DIA, do you not think the DIA would have stepped in?
You can
And
claim to be any
tried-
of those things without
Tried
getting
to level
charged with felonies.
formal charges against him?
And would have
whether-
assisted the FBI in making sure that he was charged with these things in quick
Like, this
manner,
guy is not
not
DIA.
waiting months and months and months.
He's CIA. He's a clown.
No.
It doesn't make any sense for people to
They're charging him in federal court with these things that they have no merit. They have no weight. I mean, he asked his followers to make phone calls and email a company who didn't live up to their end of a contract, and he was charged with conspiracy for that. Meanwhile, he's claimed to be a DIA agent. Meanwhile, he has threatened the Queen of Denmark and said, you got 30 days to abdicate the throne. The Queen of Denmark hasn't done that since the 1250s. They don't step down, they die in office.
Yeah.
And then it's abdicated. It goes to the next in the bloodline.
Yep, and then on April 6th, there was an article that
But the
she
thing is, I
she
gotta
had
finish.
mentioned
It
that she
the
was stepping
30th
down.
day of his threat.
Yep,
He said you got
the
30 days,
day.
or I'm
Timing
taking
is
it out
everything.
myself.
And she
the 30th day
made an
gone.
announcement that she was abdicating the throne to her son and his wife.
But that's not an Austin proof, apparently.
It's a pretty committed LARP, sitting in a federal prison,
Yeah.
suffering from celiac disease.
Red pilling the whole goddamn
the-
place.
Here, I mean, people can say whatever they
I
want
look at
about
In
Austin's
prison, he's red
situation
pilling the prisoners.
like
That's
Trump's
what's beautiful.
situation where what did Trump have to gain from from running for president? He could have just as easily lived his billionaire lifestyle and not lost all the
Way
money
more
he
easy.
lost. His life would have been so much easier living it out in his in his 70s,
But
where
yeah.
instead he chose to step forward and to lead a country that desperately needed strong leadership. And in the same point, I asked people the question, what has Austin gained from telling people that he's Q? What has he gained from this?
Nothing.
right? Massive amounts
Other
of hate
than
and torture.
Absolute vitriol, just like
Yep.
we saw with Trump. So
Now he's starving to
for
death
me,
in
that's
prison.
just, again, another one of those kind of like empirical proofs or evidences, if you will, that it just falls in line with everything else, because that's exactly what I would expect to see from somebody who actually was Q, claiming to be Q. I wouldn't expect them to just be accepted openly.
He took on this
Because
role
Q wouldn't do
unwillingly.
things that way. He didn't do things that way when they first started this whole thing. Everything was about breadcrumbs, right? Dropping you little pieces. You got to put it together for yourself. You have to solve the puzzle. So when he comes out to the public, is he just going to be like, "Hey guys, here's all my evidence. I'm Q. I'm the guy. Just come follow me now." And Austin made the point, like, if we did things that way, then again we would just fall right into this religious mindset where we're
Yes.
just blindly following
Another
authority
cult following.
because, oh my God, now 50 million people are just following Austin Steinbart because he showed them the proof, instead of dropping them evidence for them to follow the
Yes.
crumbs for themselves to see who was actually
Willing to-
really taking the message of QAnon that Q was giving to us this whole time, which was to think for yourself.
Think for yourself.
Don't let these people tell you. Just like I didn't let Jordan tell me, I didn't let Dustin tell me, I didn't let any of these people tell me because I wasn't afraid of what they had to say.
But you can
I know what the
you can get
message
tidbits
is.
from them. There are tidbits.
Well,
I've gained
no,
things
I
from
mean
them.
like when I came out in support of Austin, that they came at me and told me I was wrong, and I'm like, I'm not just gonna. So I offered them to come on multiple times after they came onto my Twitter, went and commented, just commenting on my stuff about supporting Austin, calling me delusional, telling me I'm his boyfriend, everything like being like personal attacks. I'm like, you guys don't get this yet. You really don't understand that I know who this guy is. So nothing that you
Yeah.
throw my way is going to affect me at all.
It just makes us laugh
because
on the inside.
because I'm like, dude, it's like trying to argue with somebody that there's a glass of water in front of them, and they see it as empty, and there's really a glass of water there, and you're like trying to convince them there's a glass of water, but they're so far in their own imagination that they can't even see what's right in front of their face.
I made a post recently that
It's
that
crazy
applies
to me.
on Facebook. I said it, and I hate this thing, this new age. Like, you have your truth, and I have my truth, and that there's wiggle room there.
They're both true at the same time,
or that there
something.
isn't the real truth. Like that, some people look at
Right.
things and they present this idea now lately. I hear it a lot. You have your truth. You remember it your way. I remember my way. Like there isn't an actual truth. It's
Yeah.
my interpretation of it and yours.
It's
and
like
there is a real truth.
Well, how would that apply in this situation? There's either Austin Steinbart is Q or he's not Q. Either he's running this operation or he's not. There's no middle ground there. You know what I mean? You can't really. You can say like I don't know one way or the other. That's totally that's actually like the most fair position to take. Is just be like I don't know, because how could you know?
Unless
Because
you know
everything
you
that he's
don't.
put out there, you could look at it one way or the other depending on your own personal bias. But if you're looking at it neutrally, you would be like, I'm just going to sit on the side and be like,
Take
I'm
it
going to
in.
enjoy the show.
Yeah, take
And this
it
guy
all
could be
in.
cute, he could not be cute, but either way, this is going to be really interesting. And for me, I just know he is because I'm already on that side of it. I've seen enough through my own research of body language and signals, like
Consistency, righteousness.
I know
not shying away
from being down here for the last few months and being around Austin for that entire time, getting to know him personally, all it's done is made me trust him even more. I trust his decision making, I trust his information, everything that I would expect to see from somebody who would be put in this situation and be legitimate. He's meeting all of my projections from what I thought this Q person would be. And so based off of that, if you want to call that a personal bias, that's just based off of my own not an actual bias, but just bias towards
What's
my
your
own
perception of
like
what's
my
in
own
front of you?
perception of things, right? Of how I see things. And so because I see enough coincidences, nobody's going to be able to back me off the Austin train and be like,
right there with
oh yeah, that's new information I never saw. I guess you got me. Like, he's not the guy all of a sudden. Like, I'm already.
It's gonna take something
I already
pretty
know you.
hardcore to throw
Yeah,
us
it
off
would.
the
It
track
would
now.
literally take like the president himself being like, guys, this whole QAnon thing and Austin Steinbart is ridiculous. But even at that point, a lot of people, I guarantee you, Q people especially, would be like, that's just a calm. Disinformation is necessary. Right? Like, so they just want to believe what they want to believe, no matter what. Nothing really is
Right.
anything. And at the end of the day, all we really can do is just enjoy the show. And we're just getting Austin's message out there. That's our little piece of the pie here, is getting Austin's message specifically. Just like there's, in other sections of the QAnon movement, like the JFK Jr. is alive people, they've had that section of their movement for a while. And really, it's interesting how, though, that those people don't get attacked nearly as much from the main Q horde people
it is interesting.
as like
There's more
people
of them.
making way bigger. So Austin Steinbart being Q apparently is a bigger claim than JFK Jr. being alive.
Well,
because we
the
get
thing
attacked
is
more
that
than they do.
Everybody. The problem is that everybody, even us, I don't believe he's alive. I used to. I did for a long time. I put it out there before that I thought that, but I've come to the realization that I don't believe he is. Hey, man, I hope he is. But that's the thing.
It would be cool.
Everybody.
It would be cool.
Let me finish.
But
everybody
no way to know.
hopes he's alive. We all hope he's alive.
Yeah, we don't want anyone
I
to
mean,
be
what an
dead.
interesting change of events that would be. But yeah, to put like all your
So it's
eggs
easy
in
to
that
attach
basket.
yourself to that hope. It's a different thing than it's easy to negate.
That's why you
the
don't
Austin Steinbart
attach
message.
yourself to the hope and you just stay neutral. So then, if he comes, awesome. If he doesn't, okay.
Right.
I don't have any emotional investment in this. This is nothing personal. Like, I'm going to be all right no matter how this turns out. And that's how everybody should be. You
But
shouldn't
when it
be so
comes to
invested in something that you let it destroy you.
Having so many people who love the Q, everything that it is, and have so many of them dismiss Q
Yeah.
and
well,
hate Q.
That's going to be theirs to carry for the rest of their lives, though, too. You really have to think about it like this, too. All of these people that have just fucking done and said all these terrible, like, just cruel things to a lot of us and to Austin and everything else, they're going to have to sit with the fact that they were wrong for the rest of their lives. It's not going to be us that are going to have to carry that weight, and that's going to be theirs to carry. And what's going to make it probably even more gut-wrenching for them is the fact that we'll still be here with open arms, like
Right.
Yeah,
kind
that's right.
and
That's what I
ready to
say.
understand.
I say whenever you're
and
ready.
then they're going to have to carry that. It's going to be even heavier, because here they were, just treating you like crap, and then you still brought them back with open arms. So that's going to be a big deal too. I think.
Yeah, it's that's really why Luke and I are sitting here. Is we are the news is our motto in the QAnon movement.
My name on my page, my thing was "We Are the News Now." That was my thing at
Yeah.
Real News Now. Yep.
And we've got
Mine
this,
says Austin Steinbart is Baby Q and Q plus, right below my name.
So we've got this member of our movement, which whatever you think of Austin, you can't deny that he's not an integral part of this movement. And the people that describe him as a shill or even worse, an intelligence plant, I've heard accusations that he's setting up a false flag. But those same people that make those charges wouldn't take him up on his offer to do an interview. And that's really disappointing, because if he were to be a shill, or even worse, some sort of intelligence asset working
Expose
against
him.
us, that seems pretty relevant.
Their job would be to expose him.
Right, if
get
they-
him
if they were-
behind a
if they were
microphone,
real-
challenge him to his face, expose him.
If
Do your
these
job.
if these Q tubers, these Q Pharisees were actually like investigative journalists, they would be dying for a
Jumping
story
at it.
like this.
Jumping.
Because they want to get to him and be like, okay, if
Just
you're
like
this,
I was,
how about
yeah.
this? If you say this, then
Right? Expose them.
why haven't they done any of that?
I have friends that are
It's
major
like they want
influencers.
you to just forget that he's even here. Now that it's been 6 months since he's been dealing with this court issue, they're just hoping he goes away. And I guarantee you, we're not going anywhere.
Nope.
So good luck with all of that, especially to you Q Pharisees. That's not happening. We're not going anywhere. Austin's not going anywhere. Steinbart Media has only grown stronger as a result of all of this. And going forward, especially once he gets out of jail and he has the freedom to move about, this is only going to blow up that much quicker. So I look forward to the commencement of the eating of crow and all of the Pharisees, and not so much their followers. I tend to have a little bit softer heart for the followers of the Q Pharisees who have also lashed out very.
It's easy.
But they're just following.
Yeah.
Once the tides change, they're gonna change teams.
In the beginning of a change,
they're
a
gonna go
patriot is
whichever
a-
way the tides go.
Like Twain
so
said,
you can't worry about those.
In the beginning of a
people.
change, a patriot is a rare and scarce man, often hated and scorned.
Even
But once the cause succeed, the timid join him, for then it costs nothing to be a patriot.
Yeah, Mark
It's
Twain.
Mark Twain.
Yeah.
And then even those that dismiss him as being mentally ill, it's still very disappointing, because if Austin were to be mentally ill and in prison because he claimed to be part of our movement, as far as I'm concerned, that still makes him our casualty.
Yes.
He's still our responsibility.
And exactly. So, for example, take the hairdresser that was arrested for, continuing to work even after they had
Right.
shut everything down. That would make her a casualty of the movement too, correct? Correct. So why should her situation be any different than this, when essentially they're speaking about the same things? The only claim that's different are their identities.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, what should that really matter? Like,
Well, and
Message over
think about
messenger.
Austin being targeted for mental issues, setting a precedent for anybody who supports QAnon.
it's defamation.
As by default having mental issues.
But his case is going to actually.
It'll set a precedent, absolutely.
so many
For anybody
ways.
associated with QAnon, one way or the other, is going to have either mental issues or not, depending on how they'd rule his case, because just by association alone, he's deemed to have mental issues.
I think he could be out of this situation he's in if he wanted to. I believe that he has the resources. I know he has the resources. That he could
have
get
to go
himself
through
dug
it.
out of this, and he wouldn't be in jail, and this would be no big deal. But what he's doing is there's so many issues involved with him being put in that situation and having 6 of his 10 rights in the Bill of Amendments, or the Bill of Rights. 6 of the 10 amendments there are. There's a case for constitutional law being on his side. He's being completely screwed with, and by letting the process flow and go through as the courts and the system wants it to, it's going to show so many defects in the system.
Right.
And he gets to kind of be the guy who exposes those things.
Right, and I think that's our ultimate goal, is to expose the system itself.
Sure.
In order to
By
bring
allowing
about,
it
to
to
bring
play
about change.
itself out as dirty
right.
as it is. And he's letting them do it to him.
We have
We're
to
very
we have to see
excited
it for
for
what
his
it is.
trial.
Yeah, me too.
Absolutely.
believe me. I've listened to every hearing.
We're
Except the
ready.
last one. I couldn't. We were waiting for a shower.
We're ready.
It's amazing how, as a movement, we can take oaths along with General Flynn, and we can call ourselves digital soldiers, but there's a lot of us that are okay leaving a man behind here.
Yeah, it's definitely disheartening. I don't like to put expectations on people, but when I did come into this movement, I did start to gain a bit of that like hopefulness or expectation of like, oh, I'd go to a Trump rally and I'd see a Q follower and he'd be like, nice shirt, bro. And I'd be like, oh, we're Q people. You
Right.
know what I mean? We're separate from the MAGA people, even though we're on the same team.
Right.
We're just kind of like the special
MAGA
forces
plus.
division of general like MAGA supporters. We're still MAGA supporters. We're just like, holy crap, we've recognized that
There's
running
another-
this,
there's
this
another-
operation to actually take down the deep state and not just, oh, Trump's
A great
cool.
president.
I like him when he speaks. Oh, he's a strong leader. It's not just that.
He's a
It's
part
all
of the
those
plan
things.
to save the world and
and
expose the
they're-
underbelly
right.
of humanity.
Right. They're giving us this like behind the scenes look at an ongoing live military operation. And not only is this the first time this has ever happened, but this is the first military operation of its kind.
Mm-hmm.
So we're getting like a double whammy here. We're getting a behind the scenes look at something we can't even understand because it's the first operation that's ever been done like this. So if people who are actually in the operation barely understand what it is they're doing, how is it the average person is supposed to really understand the depths of this? And when they say disinformation is necessary, or when they say, these things to mislead us or put us in different directions, while at the same time giving us real information, it really puts it on us to learn how to discern information for ourselves.
And be able to challenge our
And
cognitive dissonance.
question whether when we're just being told something that we can't verify, to kind of put that on the back burner, because it's like, okay, well, that's a big claim, but I can't really verify it, and I'm not just going to take it because Q said it, because Q already said this information is necessary. But when they share with you like articles or things that have actually happened, where you can look at it and be like, yes, this is an actual event, or this is an actual thing, here's pictures, here's something, that's information that you can take and you can actually look at and you can decipher from that what it's supposed to mean versus
Future proves past.
right, just being told something and then having to discern, okay, is this real information or is this disinformation?
Right.
No idea, because they told us it's necessary.
That's my analogy with the puzzle. I imagine this whole thing, the whole queue, and the reality in general is like someone, I always compare it to, grandma gave me a puzzle for Christmas. 2,000 piece puzzle. And it came in a big bag with 5,000 pieces in it. She said, and there was no box.
Good luck.
No picture to look at. And he goes, here you go. Put it together. And it takes a long, long time to find those border pieces and which ones are the right color that belong to the puzzle to begin with. But as you go, you find the edges and you start realizing the color it's going to be. And over years, eventually you get the outside done. You get an idea. But as you go, it begins, the longer you stick with it, eventually more pieces, one by one, every few days, another one might fit. And over time, it starts getting fuller. And as that time goes on, it's easier to discern which pieces are never going to fit. You can see it and go, it's never going to fit. Because you spent so much time figuring out how to then get it filled in. It starts making sense eventually. And the farther you go, the faster it comes together, and the easier it is to throw out the ones that never going to be a part of it.
You described that in a very similar way that I describe, kind of my truth-seeking path. I say that I take the Buddhist approach and I throw everything into the truth and the false pile, okay? And then as I go and as I begin to, pull little pieces out, your picture begins to expand and you're able to pull more pieces out of those pile and connect them together. So like when I first hear or read anything, I don't automatically yes, this is fact, this is true. Like I wait until I can see how this little piece of information fits into all of these other pieces that I have to somehow
But you
connect
have to
it
spend a lot
Yes,
of time
you do.
in order to figure out where they go. And
Well, and that's essentially how they've allowed all these fucking terrible things to continue for this long, is because the average person does not have the time that it takes to truly be able to find and discern the truth in this. They don't. They're so busy with
Literally
having
do
to
not.
run their
They
lives
don't.
and their jobs and their stress and just everything that comes along with being a normal human being, let alone being a human being that has a
It's
family or all
excusable.
these other things to take care of.
It is, right?
There's
It's
no
excusable,
way.
like that you don't. Not everybody does, but I'm given the luxury. I don't have children, and I have an obsessive desire to figure it out. So I have to, but I understand that not everybody can, or
Yes.
a lot of people don't want to. But
There's
even
that
those
too.
who want to, it takes a lot of time. It really takes a big commitment.
It does.
I'm going to put you both on the spot a little bit again. We're coming up on almost the 3-year anniversary of the first Q job. And Austin was working on this
28.
operation before that.
Yeah,
But
28. Yep.
over the last 3 years, Team Where We Go On, We Go All, including myself a couple times, have made predictions on timing. And we almost always miss, but many of us continue to persist. So I'm just curious, from your perspective, any limbs you want to go out there on with timing predictions for anything involving this?
I specifically don't say dates or anything like that
That's
for
a
a
good
reason.
answer.
But one thing that I will say was super instrumental in waking up my family was that I did, in a sense, start predicting the future. I got to a certain point where I pretty much understood what was coming, what was going to happen. So I gave that to them in layman's terms, essentially, kept it very, very basic. And then all of a sudden, when all those things started happening, that's what made them realize, oh my gosh, all that stuff she said at Thanksgiving was true. She does kind of know what she's talking about. And then that incited just a little bit, just enough fear inside of them that they were sort of willing to search for the truth for themselves. But I don't know. what
Eventually,
that is.
you prime the pump. Eventually,
Yes.
it takes off for itself.
Yes, but that's as vague as I'll go. I mean, I'll just occasionally drop a
About
3
you,
to
Aaron?
6 months thing, but no, I don't do specific days. I don't.
Yeah, no, for me particularly, my main mantra is trust the plan. So because I trust the plan, I have no idea what's going to happen. I have literally no clue. I just take it day by day, hour by hour, especially when working, so closely with Austin. I mean, it's like, you ask to do one thing, or it's like, oh, let's do this or do that. And it's like, how, if I were to try to project that into the overall plan and what I see for 6 months, I'd have no idea.
Yeah,
So
there's
it's
no
like,
way.
it's not even worth it for me at this point.
You'll learn your lesson.
Even trying.
And then you just kill your credibility.
Because I used to do that. I
honestly.
used to do that all
That's
the
the
time.
sad
Not gonna
part.
lie.
You really
yeah.
do when you're out there dropping these dates,
Yeah. Well,
that's the sad
every
part of-
month, where
that's
you
the
think
sad part
something's
of-
going to happen and then it never does. Then you're just making people not want to listen.
It was
to
almost
you.
like they set us up so that it became hard to have credibility, because we got those drops in the March of 2018. Hillary Clinton will be arrested this week. She will, and then you realize later on, after you keep going with this, that there's deltas that will happen, but it's going to play into, and
has to do with the manifestation
But you can't know
process,
that
too.
until after having all those disappointments, and then you start seeing things happen and seeing the deltas and how they play out with mathematical precision that's beyond any sort of coincidental possibility. That then after being in this I've been in it for 2 years of the 3. I started about this time 2 years ago, and I wish I'd have gotten to it sooner, but I jumped in with everything I had as soon as I committed. I needed to know it, and I've had so many disappointments, but then I've had, finally, you start seeing that's what they're doing. That's how it works. The timing is this way. Oh, so now it's a waiting game, and we have to have faith.
Well, and ideally, it happens when it's the best time for the collective for it to happen. They're not going to make these giant moves when potentially, 75% of the population could revolt against it. There's a certain 0 point, like they like to say, that they're waiting for everybody to get to before certain things
There
drop.
has
And then
to be.
after they reach those
Drip.
0 point, then those things drop.
We
But
need the drips.
You got to do it slowly and just like
We need the
I remember
breadcrumbs project.
a time where I was thinking, I just want to know everything now. I can handle it. Like I'm tired of having these moments of clarity and seeing things and feeling confused all over again. I just want it all now. But then the deeper I got, the more I'm like, thank God they didn't give this to me all at once, because I probably literally would have had like a mental break. Like it's slashing apart like everything that you've ever known.
Yeah.
And that has to be done in waves in order to like save a majority of the population and their sanity and their ability to continue being humans after they find out all of the truth,
Do you guys think we can keep going? We could go all night, I feel like. Do you want to do another one?
I think we're
If we could
Let's
take an
hurry into it.
intermission real quick for like 5 minutes, I would totally do
Might
it.
not be.
I
Yeah.
actually really just had one more question.
Oh,
if
do
you want to
it.
just
Yeah,
knock
let's
out.
just wrap her up for
All right,
tonight.
yeah.
I think that'd be a
You've,
good idea.
You've shared a lot of personal stuff from each of you and your experiences, and I'm hoping as I hear it matching up with stories of people, whether they support Austin or not, just people seeking truth.
Absolutely.
And I hope that opens some eyes for some of our truth-seeking friends, even if they are resistant and been narrative herded. So on that personal note, and you mentioned the hard sacrifices video that Austin did, which I also think was very important and had a big impact. As two people that have worked closely with him and obviously trust him, do you have any personal insights on him, any character traits that maybe we don't know about that you could share that he wouldn't mind?
Let me think about this though for a minute.
That's a tough question.
Okay, he's way funnier than people give him credit for. And people watch his videos, and in some of them for a long time, they assumed he was just this, like cocky,
he was a
arrogant,
drunk.
whatever. Yeah, like just didn't care,
He had a
was
drink.
just making a mockery of things. And he is not like that at all.
He didn't wanna do those videos.
He didn't. And this was not exactly like the position that he imagined himself being in. And regardless of who he is in this movement, he's still a normal person, just like we are. And he's still dealing with the insane stresses of the situation as a normal person, just like we are, And I think people forget that when they see Austin. They
With
think,
the weight.
it's this fucking game show host hair fucking Q guy, blah, blah, blah. That's their first opinion. And he is not like that at all.
He's a 29-year-old guy who is recruited by
Yes, he's a
his
human
future
being.
self to save the world.
No, and I'll say this, and this will hopefully sort of speak volumes in and of itself. Like I said, when I did my interview with him, I had never done anything like that in my entire life, ever. I had never been in front of a camera, nothing. I was absolutely terrified. And I was even more terrified because of who he was and the videos that I'd seen him make and how he would, respond to certain things or certain things that he would say. But I felt so unbelievably comfortable. It was like I had known him forever. And we literally just sat there, and it was just like an absolutely normal conversation. Like, he is so much more just relaxed and down to earth than
I love his forthrightness
that he
and
is. Yes, but he is still very he'll tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Like, he's not going to sugarcoat
I
it.
know.
He'll
He
tell
tells
you
the truth about
exactly
things
what
that a lot
the
of people
truth
might
is.
find shameful, or
Yes.
things that would be innuendo and rumor about him.
He'll let
They
you know he
would
doesn't
be
care.
if he didn't say exactly what he did.
Yes.
He was a little hellion. He was a little fuck off when he was a kid, when he was young, but he'll tell you the stories, and it's kind of interesting. And it built an interesting character out of him, and his family history and all the things he went through with his grandparents. And
And by the
There's a
way,
lot of
his
crazy stuff.
parents are two of the kindest people
Yeah,
that
I
I have ever met in my entire life.
never met
They
them, but
are
I listened to them at
so
the court
kind,
hearing when
so
they were
kind, yes.
pleading to have
and
him
when
return to
Cindy
the
was
home.
talking, like, as a mom, when I was listening to that specific hearing too, my heart just like broke for her. And I can only imagine that any other mom that was listening to that conversation
My
would
heart
have
was
felt the
broken
same
when
way,
Judge-
because you could just hear how much she loves him and how much she cares. And you can see that she feels the injustice of all of this too. And she's just doing everything that she possibly can do as a woman and as a mom to try and save him. But she's also faced with that like reality of what can I do in this
And
situation,
having to
you know, other than just hope that my love will be enough, you know? And I know that we say love wins and all these things, but in this situation, it's not winning. And it's up to our voices to make these things happen.
Well, hopefully
for
we're
him.
making an impact.
Yeah,
And people need to understand he's worthy of your love. Like, stop being so mean to him. He is one of the coolest people that I've ever met, and it's absolutely ridiculous that everybody has all these terrible things to say about him all the time.
What a smart guy,
Everyone just
too.
needs to put it down and just give him a chance. No one's saying believe him. Just give him a chance. Just stop listening to everyone that tells you to think something different and figure these things out for yourself.
You'll be fascinated just because he's wise beyond his years, just for his historical knowledge of everything that people bring to him. He has like, it's just centuries of historical, the hierarchy of societies and all of the melee and shit that's gone down in history. He knows all of it.
There's
And
only
it's-
3 people in my life I have conversations with where I feel dumb at the end of it, and he's one of them.
It's beyond fascinating.
Absolutely,
I mean,
110%.
I enjoy history, but he's enlightened me to so many things that are the underbelly of history. But it's true. And learning about the Treaty of Tordesillas is really, really important too. You know, there's some very, very basic fundamental things that we don't know about that have controlled society. That's the fundamental building blocks of all the corruption in the underbelly of history and society.
Alice mentioned Austin's parents. I just want to interject here. If you're not already on the Steinbart Media Group website for the Amorphous Archive, you need to get there. But there's also a pretty powerful interview with Austin's mother and father who check it out, see what you think, see if they're LARPs or shills. It seemed like a couple people that are worried about their son being in prison unjustly to me.
Do you got any personal insights into Austin you want to share that he won't punish you for later?
I don't know. Yeah, I would say since I met Austin, our relationship started out very much like I was his court jester, where I was there to make him laugh. And for people who don't know, he actually enjoys comedy quite a bit. He loves pranks. He loves saying ridiculous things. Like, he doesn't say that. He loves when people say and do ridiculous things. So that was like our initial. I love to do those things personally, so it just was like really cool that he actually enjoyed it.
Have you ever played a prank
Didn't
on-
think I was like really like douchey or like whatever. He just was like, he saw that I like to make people feel uncomfortable sometimes, but I also like to be funny, like to mix it up. But he gets that. And so I think he even explained that in one of his videos about me specifically and how I like to go about doing things. So learning that he actually enjoyed my humor was a huge win for me. Austin is, if anything, I would say from his childhood, his growing up, his biggest trait is his ambition. He's mentioned a number of times of having a personal vendetta against the Royal Death Racket, or D6 specifically. I think that's whatever it is that caused that, whether it would have been when he mentioned his grandma dying under suspicious circumstances after starting a court case against the Catholic Church about them molesting his uncle, and she died shortly after that. I mean, that could have been the reason for his vendetta, but for whatever reason, he has a vendetta
Something spurred him into this.
so there's something that drives him outside of what any of us are even aware of, to complete this mission. And he's been driven for this since the age of 17, since he realized what he was going to be capable of, going through these missions and going forward. He's incredibly competitive.
Sounds a lot like Trump.
I'm
in those
decent
ways.
at basketball, but let me tell you, when I was up even a little bit on him, he showed no mercy on me. And I'm pretty competitive too. I don't like losing by any stretch of the imagination, but he is incredibly gifted at basketball. So I learned that the hard way as well. But even more so, he gets in your head. So like, we would play basketball, and I'm a pretty good shot.
It's a Neuralink.
So I'd be like 10 feet back from the 3-point line, and I'd drop a couple on him, and then because he wasn't guarding me because I was so far back, and then he'd start saying, "Oh, you ain't gonna make that," just trying to get in my head. And then when that wasn't working, then he switched it up to like being super aggressive, and that worked because then I was like, now I was intimidated because he just let me shoot it for free. I'm like, dude, I'll make these all day. Then he got aggressive with me, and I was like, crap, I actually have to play now.
Yeah.
And so he recognized my strategy pretty quick. So he's really good at analysis, very good at strategy, very good at getting in people's heads when he needs to. But I've always seen him as being on the right side of things, meaning he knows what he's capable of, but he doesn't use it all the time. You know what I mean? He's very well aware of what he's capable of doing in any
Birds of a feather flock together.
But he doesn't, just like he makes a point, like there was a video we were watching earlier today where he talked about like him being a DIA agent and not a DIA officer. And he asked people, he's like, so what would you rather me do? Would you rather me be like my predecessor and just go out and murder anybody I don't like? Or would you rather me like deal with it like a normal person? Mm-hmm. It's like, he could do those things. He really could. He could be just like his predecessor if that's what people really wanted. But clearly, we're trying to change the world.
Yeah, he's got more nuance.
He's not trying to be McCain Jr. So
No.
he's a complete 180.
I've never once in charge of the D6.
I've never once felt pressured by him. Not yet. I would say it's
Who do
not.
you think is?
It's not until he's in control. So it's whoever.
Who do you
I mean,
think
I
is?
guess
I think
I wouldn't
potentially
know.
his wife could have easily taken over
I don't know.
responsibilities for
You have
him
your
too.
theory. You don't want to share it?
There's no way for me personally whether
Respect
he's
that.
currently in control of D6 or if he's because he did call himself McCain's predecessor, so that it's not saying there's someone in between them. So I mean that's a fair point. Or maybe there is.
I don't have an
maybe
opinion.
there's an interim boss right now until Austin's finished his current mission.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't have an opinion on it, but
No way to say.
We've talked about it, and we're going to
Yeah.
keep it between us.
I've never asked him to be honest with you. That's a good
Yeah,
question.
I don't have it either.
I'm sure he'd be like, I can't answer that.
Yeah. Or I'll share that with you later.
It's an ongoing
Yeah.
military
That's
operation.
something I will
can't,
tell you. I know
can't
it's a great
divulge that
question, and
information.
it's something that I can't tell you right now,
Right.
but I will share it with you very soon. That's what he would
Fair
say.
enough.
Well,
Should we wrap it up soon?
I'm really glad to
Yeah.
hear that. I'm really glad to hear that he's hyper competitive.
He's
'Cause,
very competitive.
We're gonna need him to be,
Yeah.
and we don't want him to get tired of winning.
He reminds
I
me.
don't
He
think
reminds
he's gonna
me
do
of
that.
Trump at 29, who's like a nerd instead
Yeah.
of just like a businessman.
Yeah.
He's just a tech geek, but he has the same personality.
Yeah.
I literally see no difference between them.
Yeah, they're very,
The
very
way they operate is so similar.
Yep.
Awesome.
And I think that Trump has a vendetta too. I think it may have something to do with Melania. I think that maybe there's a chance.
Could have to do with autism.
Let's wrap it up.
I don't know.
Yeah, okay, we'll wrap it up.
We don't know. There could be a lot of reasons for Trump to have a vendetta. I do agree.
Yeah.
We'll wait to see
I
how
think it's
that
beautiful
plays
if he
out.
does.
I don't know. That'd be
Might
great
be.
though. Could be because of JFK
I mean,
Jr.
again, it still
Because
could be the
JFK Jr.
family
was one of
history
Trump's
thing,
best
too.
friends.
My theory is different, but we can talk about that. off the
Who
record.
knows? But
Nope.
again, thank you guys. It's been a blast.
Yeah,
Really
thank
appreciate
Thank you
it.
so much.
Awesome.
Thanks for having us on.
It's
Like I
wonderful.
said, the offer that Austin Steinbart made and now Steinbart Media Group is sticking with is if you want to know what's going on, they'll talk to you. They're open, they're transparent, and we spent a few days with them here so that there was a level of trust before we went into this, and these people care. These people care. So you can say whatever you want about them, but we're going to maintain the position that both Austin and his team are relevant. And that's what we're doing here, and that's what we're going to keep doing here until we get the story done. So thank you both
Thanks,
to
guys.
and thank you for your
Yeah,
efforts and everything that you're doing.
Thank you guys. Really
Absolutely.
appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Such a pleasure. It's a gift.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Right on.
Thank you so
Blast.
much. Truth or Bust 2020, Steinbart Media Group.
Adios.